This is Mr. Rahul Hunkalas, Assistant Professor and Workshop Superintendent from NV Nole Singhad College of Engineering, Solapur. I am having more than 12 years of teaching experience and my specialization in mechanical design engineering. Now, today we are going to discuss with a next very important point in combustion in CI engine, that is a delay period. Now, delay period, as we have already discussed during the different stages of combustion, this is the first stage of the combustion in CI engine, that is the delay period. It is the time interval generally which is measured in terms of millisecond between the commencement of the fuel injection and beginning of ignition and combustion. In actual practice, this time is very low as 0.006 second. See, generally in this case, the delay period is nothing but, as we have already discussed, as the fuel is injected inside the engine cylinder in the case of CI engine, then it will take some time to burn with the hot air which is present inside the engine cylinder, and during this time interval of the crank travel is called the delay period. Now in this case there are two types of delay period. One is a physical delay period and second one is a chemical delay period. One by one we will understand. Now first of all we are going to understand the physical delay period. What do I mean by the physical delay period? Physical delay period is the time elapses between the beginning of fuel injection and the beginning of pre-flame reaction. During this period, the heating and vaporization of fuel drop and diffusion of air into the vapor layer takes place. This results in the formation of suitable mixture of fuel vapor and air ready for the next chemical reaction. Now in this case, what happens, as the diesel is injected at the end of the compression stroke inside the engine cylinder where the hot air is already present. Now this is nothing but the physical time which required for mixing of diesel in this particular hot air. This time is nothing but called as a physical delay period. The next one, that is called a chemical delay period. Now the meaning of chemical things, chemical is nothing but when as we know the definition of engine is a device which is generally used to convert the chemical energy of fuel into a heat energy, and the heat energy is again useful for doing some mechanical work. That is nothing but called as a engine definition. Now here, what do you mean by the chemical delay period? It is the time that elapses between the beginning of a chemical reaction and beginning of the ignition. Means whenever any kind of a diesel will start to burn, it has undergone some kind of a chemical reaction. Now in the case of chemical delay period, we understand it is the time that elapses between the beginning of chemical reaction and the beginning of ignition. During this period, the fuel vapor is oxidized at an ever increasing rate until ignition occurs. In other words, this is the period taken up by the chemical reaction to attain the point of burning or self-ignition. Now this is about the two types of delay period, that is physical delay period and second one is the chemical delay period. This is the 6-mark question, may be asked in your examination. Explain the delay period and its types in details. Now the next point of our discussion, that is different factors which affect the delay period. Then there will be different factors which affect the delay period. Because of this factor, the delay period will be increases. Now these factors are, the first factor, the properties of fuel. Now under these fuel properties, the different subpoints are volatility of fuel, latent heat of fuel, viscosity of fuel, surface tension of the fuel. These are the different properties. Now the second factor which affects the delay period, that is intake temperature, third one compression ratio, fourth one engine speed, fifth one type of combustion chamber, and sixth one the injection in advance. Now we are not going in detail. The question just asked to you the different factors which affect the delay period. You have to just enlist these names. Now after this, the next point of our discussion, that is knocking or detonation tendency in CI engine or in diesel engine. We already discussed the knocking or detonation tendency in the case of SI engine. Now Here we are going to understand for CI engine. Always remember the knocking tendency in the case of CI engine is totally depend on the delay period. As the delay period increases, the knocking tendency of CI engine will be increases. Now in CI engine the tendency of knock is totally dependent on the delay period, or it is also called as a ignition delay. If the delay period is short, then smoother pressure force developed in the piston, on the piston. But if the delay period is increased or it is longer, then the actual burning of the fuel droplet is delayed. Then a greater quantity of fuel droplet will accumulate in the combustion chamber. Means what? If the delay period is increases, what is the meaning of increase in the delay period? My dear friends, if the delay period increases, then we understand the more time to takes place for burning of the diesel inside the engine cylinder. So as the delay period increases, more amount of diesel will come through the injector inside the engine cylinder, and because of the extension in the delay period and the more amount of accumulation of the diesel inside the engine cylinder, ultimately as burning will start to take place, it creates more pressure inside the engine cylinder, and that we can understand with the help of this pressure versus time diagram. If you see over here, the D point which indicates the start of combustion, because of the enlargement or we can say extension of the delay period or increment of the delay period, the more amount of diesel will accumulate inside the engine cylinder and it will start to burn rapidly, and it creates more pressure inside the engine cylinder, and that is very dangerous for the different components of the engine. Here you can understand with the help of this point D, that is the start of combustion point. Here the abruptness in the curve or there will be some improper things happening in this particular curve. We are not getting the smoother curve over here. In the actual case, the knocking tendency will happen in the case of CI engine at the beginning of the combustion or at the start of combustion, as more amount of diesel will start to burn rapidly. Now in this case, when actual burning commences, this large quantity of fuel can cause too rapid rate of pressure rise, as we just discussed. This will result in more impact force on the piston, and rough engine operation may take place. The knock intensity is totally dependent on the quantity of fuel that undergoes the auto ignition and uncontrolled combustion. This diesel knock is generally associated with the high rate of pressure rise and the metallic sound, and engine will start to vibrate. See, the vibration of engine is nothing but the indication of the knocking tendency in the case of CI engine. Now, to avoid this rough engine operation, we have to avoid the delay period and we have to avoid the knocking. So here we stop in this lecture. Thanks for watching.